Hi there, welcome to the Deep Dive. You're here because, like us, you want to get to grips with big ideas fast. And today, using the material you sent over, we're tackling something pretty fundamental in philosophy.
We're looking at how the whole concept of the subject, the self, the individual, how that idea has changed over time.
Exactly. And your sources really point to two major currents, don't they? First, there's the modern thinking subject, which really kicks off with Descartes.
Right. And second, there's this idea of the subject being defined by rights and duties, something that comes more into focus after big events like the French Revolution.
So our mission today is basically to unpack these two key ways of thinking about the self. We want to understand where they came from and what they mean for how we think about ourselves and society today.
Sounds good. Where should we start? Descartes seems like the logical place.
Yeah, let's dive in with René Descartes. We're talking 17th century, his famous discourse on method from 1637. He's really seen as kicking off this modern idea of the individual subject.
Absolutely. His whole approach was, quite radical for the time. He decided to doubt everything he possibly could, to see if anything was left standing.
Right, the method of doubt. He questions his senses, can't always trust them. He questions if he's dreaming, even if the world around him is real.
But through all that doubting, he finds one thing he can't doubt.
The big one.
The fact that he is doubting. The act of thinking itself.
Which leads to Cogito, ergo sum.
I think, therefore I am. Exactly. For Descartes, the very act of conscious thought is the proof of existence. It's the bedrock certainty.
So this I that emerges isn't really about the body initially, is it? It's about consciousness.
Precisely. He calls it res cogitans, a thinking substance. It's the mind, the consciousness, that's the core of the subject, distinct from the physical stuff, the res extensa.
So I, consciousness, subject, they become almost interchangeable terms for Descartes, all defined by this ability to think.
Yeah, that's the essence of it. This subject is defined by self-awareness, by reason. It's capable of knowing itself and, through thought, potentially the world. It's the subject of certainty.
Okay, so that's the philosophical bedrock, this internal thinking self. But then you mentioned a shift. Things change when we start looking at society and politics.
Right. That's the second major theme from your sources. We see the emergence of the subject of rights and duties. This is tied more to political and social revolutions, particularly from the 18th century onwards.
The French Revolution being a key example mentioned in the material.
Exactly. The idea of the subject moves from being, let's say, purely a philosophical concept of mind to being a legal and political one.
So it's less about just thinking you exist and more about how you exist within a state, within a legal system.
Yes, there's this interesting shift in language noted in the sources from Cogito, meaning someone under a ruler, to Sujeto, someone who is a subject of law. They have defined rights, but also responsibilities.
And this connects directly to ideas of citizenship, right? And eventually to things like minority rights, because it establishes the individual as having a legal standing.
Absolutely. It forms the basis for a lot of modern human rights thinking. The idea that being a legal subject grants you certain entitlements.
But like with most big ideas, it wasn't without its critics. Your sources mention thinkers like Foucault.
Right. Foucault, among others, questioned how free this subject of law really is. He argued that individuals are actually, shaped and defined by power structures all around them.
His idea of the microphysics of power.
Exactly. So from this perspective, the subject isn't this purely autonomous being, whether a thinker or a rights holder. Instead, the subject is kind of produced by society, by power relations.
So the sources put it as the subject is always deduced from the other, meaning society, power, norms.
Yeah. It suggests the I isn't just a starting point, like for Descartes, but maybe more of an effect, an outcome of all these external forces acting upon us.
That definitely complicates the picture of individual freedom.
It does. So we end up with these two sort of dominant ways of thinking about the subject that we've covered.
Yeah, on one hand, you've got the Cartesian subject, the individual defined by thought, self-awareness, the foundation of knowledge.
And on the other, the subject defined by law and society, possessing rights and duties, but also potentially shaped, even constrained, by social forces and power structures.
So here's something for you, our listener, to mull over. How do these different views, the independent thinker versus the socially constructed citizen, influence how you think about individual freedom?
And what does each view imply about the role of society versus the individual? Which one feels more, true to your own experience and why?
Definitely something to keep thinking about. That wraps up our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.